have to know. One is best. South Shaolin. North Shaolin?
Both north and south.
Blood, sweat, broken ribs. Invincible Shaolin wasn't just another kung fu movie. It was a war zone disguised as a film set. Monks battled warriors, styles clashed on screen, and behind the camera, everything was falling apart. Actors fought through real injuries. One scene required 47 takes because nobody could stop bleeding. And the director, he pushed his stars so hard that 3 of them walked off set. These are 20 weird facts about Invincible Shaolin. And the bonus, let's just say the final fight wasn't choreographed. It was survival. Tighten your stance. This gets brutal fast. Number 1. Chang Che didn't want to make another Shaolin film. By 1978, he had already directed over a dozen martial arts epics for Shaw Brothers, and he was exhausted. The studio kept pushing the same formula. Monks, revenge, elaborate fight sequences, repeat. He wanted to explore different stories, modern action, psychological thrillers, anything but another period kung fu piece. But the Shaw Brothers executives had other plans. They showed him the box office numbers from his previous Shaolin films and made their position clear. This is what audiences want. This is what sells. This is what you're making. Chang Che tried to negotiate. He asked for creative control, for the ability to subvert expectations, to tell a darker story than they'd ever seen. The studio agreed, sort of. They gave him the budget, the cast, and the green light. But they had conditions. 3 major fight sequences minimum, traditional weapons only, and a runtime under 100 minutes to maximize theater rotations. Chang Che took the deal, but he had other ideas. He was going to make a Shaolin film, yes, but he was going to make it hurt. He assembled his regular troupe of actors, the Venom Mob, and told them to prepare for the most physically demanding shoot of their careers. No stunt doubles for the leads, no safety wires unless absolutely necessary. If they were going to tell a story about martial arts mastery, they were going to earn every frame. What started as another studio assignment became Chang Che's mission to prove that kung fu cinema could be art and brutality in equal measure. Number 2. The opening sequence almost killed the production before it began. Chang Che wanted to establish the film with a massive temple battle, dozens of fighters, intricate choreography, fire, destruction, chaos. But there was one problem. The Shaw Brothers lot didn't have a temple set large enough for what he envisioned. So they built one from scratch, a sprawling structure with wooden pillars, stone steps, courtyards, and enough space to stage a small war. Construction took 6 weeks. The art department worked around the clock, painting, aging the wood, making it look centuries old. When it was finally ready, Chang Che scheduled 3 days to film the opening battle. On day 1, everything went wrong. The choreography looked flat. The lighting created harsh shadows that obscured the action. And worst of all, during the first major stunt, one of the wooden pillars cracked under the weight of a leaping actor and nearly collapsed the entire structure. Production shut down immediately. Engineers were called in. They reinforced the set with steel supports hidden behind the facades, added safety measures, recalculated weight distributions. It cost an extra week and thousands of dollars the studio hadn't budgeted. Chang Che didn't flinch. He used the delay to rework the choreography, making it faster, more vicious, more precise. When they finally rolled cameras again, the temple battle became one of the most impressive sequences Shaw Brothers had ever filmed. But it came at a cost. The opening alone ate up nearly a quarter of the film's total budget, and they hadn't even introduced the main characters yet. The studio executives were furious, but Chang Che kept shooting, because sometimes the best scenes are the ones that almost don't happen. Number 3. Lu Feng was the villain everyone loved to hate, but he almost walked away before filming began. When Chang Che offered him the role of the ruthless Shaolin traitor, Lu Feng hesitated. He'd played villains before, cruel characters, morally bankrupt fighters who existed only to be defeated by the heroes, and he was tired of it. He told Chang Che he wanted to play a hero for once, someone the audience could root for, someone with depth and redemption. Chang Che listened, then made him an offer. Play this villain, and I'll give you more screen time than anyone else. Make him terrifying. Make him unforgettable. And in the final fight, you'll get a death scene so elaborate it'll take 2 days to film. Lu Feng thought about it for exactly 5 seconds and said yes. But he had one condition. He wanted to design his own fight choreography for the climax. Chang Che agreed, knowing that Lu Feng was one of the most skilled martial artists in the troupe. What Lu Feng created was insane. A prolonged one versus many battle where his character fights through wave after wave of Shaolin students using every weapon imaginable. Spears, swords, chains, bare hands. The sequence required 89 individual shots, took 3 full days instead of 2, and left Lu Feng covered in bruises, cuts, and one severely sprained ankle. He could barely walk by the end of it, but when he watched the rough cut weeks later, he smiled. Because he'd created a villain so compelling, so ruthless, that audiences would remember him long after the credits rolled. And Chang Che had kept his promise. Lu Feng owned that film. Number 4. The training montage wasn't a montage, it was hell. Chang Che wanted to show the Shaolin students learning 5 different animal styles: tiger, crane, snake, leopard, and dragon. Each style had distinct movements, philosophies, strengths, and Chang Che insisted his actors learn them all for real. He brought in martial arts consultants, masters who'd trained in authentic Shaolin techniques for decades. For 2 weeks before filming even began, the cast trained 6 hours a day. They learned stances, strikes, breathing techniques, meditation practices. Some of them already knew Kung Fu from previous films, but this was different. This was systematic, exhausting, precise. Philip Kwok, who played one of the lead Shaolin students, later said his body had never hurt so much in his life. Every muscle ached, his joints swelled. He developed blisters on his hands from weapon training that popped and bled and reformed tougher. But he kept going because everyone kept going. There was an unspoken competition among the cast. Nobody wanted to be the one who couldn't handle it, who had to tap out, who needed a break. So, they pushed each other, harder every day, until the movements became instinctual. When it came time to film the training sequences, Chang Che barely had to direct. He just set up the cameras and let his actors move. What you see on screen isn't acting. It's muscle memory earned through pain. The sweat is real. The exhaustion is real. The technique is real. And that's why those scenes still look better than anything modern CGI could create. Number 5. One fight scene required 47 takes, and it wasn't because anyone messed up. It was because everyone kept bleeding. The sequence involved a brutal courtyard battle where 3 Shaolin students face off against a group of traitors armed with bladed weapons. Chang Che wanted it to look vicious, desperate, real, so he used real metal weapons. Not sharp enough to slice through bone, but sharp enough to cut skin if someone mistimed a block or dodge. And they did, repeatedly. On take 7, Chong Sheng took a sword edge across his forearm. Not deep, but enough to bleed. They bandaged it, adjusted the choreography, went again. Take 15, another cut, different actor, different weapon. Take 23, someone's knuckles split open from a poorly timed punch against a stone wall. Each time, production stopped. Medics rushed in, bandages applied, ice packs distributed, and then they'd reset and go again. The actors never complained, never asked to stop. This was Shaw Brothers. This was Kung Fu cinema. Pain was part of the job. But by take 40, the courtyard looked like a crime scene. Blood spattered on the ground, on costumes, on weapons. The continuity supervisor was losing her mind trying to track which injuries appeared in which takes. Finally, on take 47, they got it. Perfect choreography, perfect timing, perfect brutality. Everyone hit their marks. Nobody bled. Chang Che yelled "cut," and the entire cast collapsed where they stood. The scene made it into the final film exactly as shot, take 47. If you watch closely, you can see the exhaustion in their eyes. That's not acting, that's survival. And it made for one of the most visceral fight scenes in martial arts cinema. Number 6. The weapons master quit halfway through production, and for good reason. His name was Master Wong, a veteran of dozens of Shaw Brothers films, a man who had crafted swords for decades, who understood balance, weight distribution, the physics of stage combat. He'd worked with Chang Che before, and knew the director pushed boundaries, but Invincible Shaolin pushed too far. The script called for increasingly elaborate weapons, specialized polearms, flexible whip swords, multi-sectional staffs, weapons that barely existed outside of martial arts legends. Master Wong built them all by hand, spending weeks in the studio workshop, forging metal, treating wood, perfecting each piece. But then Chang Che started asking for modifications. Make this sword heavier, make that spear longer. I want real chains, not prop chains. Each request meant more work, more risk, more liability. The turning point came during a scene involving a meteor hammer, a weapon consisting of weights on the end of a long rope, spun and thrown with devastating force. Chang Che wanted it used at full speed, full power, in close quarters with other actors. Master Wong refused. He explained the danger, the impossibility of controlling such a weapon in tight choreography, the certainty that someone would get seriously hurt. Chang Che insisted. They argued for an hour. Finally, Master Wong set down his tools, looked Chang Che in the eye, and walked off set. He didn't yell, didn't make a scene, just left. The production scrambled. They brought in his assistant to finish the remaining weapons, simplified some of the more dangerous requests, worked around the gaps, and they filmed the meteor hammer scene with a lighter, safer version. Master Wong never came back to that set, but years later, when asked about it, he simply said, "Some directors create art, some create chaos. Chang Che created both." Number 7. Philip Kwok performed his own stunts, even the one that should have paralyzed him. There's a scene midway through the film where his character leaps from a second-story balcony, flips mid-air, and lands in a fighting stance surrounded by enemies. Standard kung fu movie fare. Except Chang Che didn't want wires. He wanted it real. Philip looked at the height, measured the distance, calculated the landing. Then he looked at Chang Che and asked one question. "If I get hurt, do we have time in the schedule for me to recover?" Chang Che thought about it and said, "We'll make time." That was all Philip needed to hear. They set up crash mats, rehearsed the trajectory, practiced the landing over and over at lower heights. When it came time to film, Philip climbed to the balcony, took 3 deep breaths, and jumped. He rotated perfectly, limbs tucked, controlled descent. But the landing went wrong. He came down too hard on his left leg. Knee buckling, ankle twisting, momentum carrying him forward into an unplanned roll. The cameras kept rolling. Philip converted the stumble into the fighting stance, powered through the pain, and completed the take as enemies rushed in around him. Chang Che yelled "cut." Philip collapsed. His knee had partially dislocated. The medic stabilized it, iced it, wrapped it tight. The doctor said he needed weeks of rest, maybe surgery. Philip said he needed 3 days. He hobbled through the rest of the shoot, modifying his fight choreography to protect the injured leg, masking the limp with clever camera angles and quick cuts. And it worked. You'd never know watching the film that he was fighting through agony in every subsequent scene. That's the kind of dedication Shaw Brothers demanded, and Philip Kwok delivered it without question. Number 8. The snake-style sequence broke the choreographer's mind. Tang Chia was one of the most respected action directors in Hong Kong cinema, a man who'd designed fights for hundreds of films, who understood rhythm, pacing, the visual language of combat. But the snake style challenged him in ways nothing else had. The style required fluid, unpredictable movements, strikes from unusual angles, the ability to make the human body move like it had no bones. And Chang Che wanted it perfect. He wanted audiences to believe these fighters had truly mastered something ancient, something dangerous, something beyond normal martial arts. Tang Chia spent weeks studying real snakes, watching how they coiled, struck, defended, observing the strange geometry of their movements. Then he had to translate that into choreography that human actors could perform while still looking inhuman. He created sequences where fighters would drop into splits, spin on their backs, strike upward from ground level, use their entire bodies as weapons. The actors struggled. These weren't natural movements. They required flexibility most people don't possess, muscle control that took years to develop. Some couldn't do it at all. Tang Chia had to simplify, modify, find compromises between his vision and physical reality. And then, just when he thought he had cracked it, Chang Che would watch the dailies and say, "It doesn't look dangerous enough. Make it faster. Make it stranger." Tang Chia would return to the workshop, literally, working with his team late into the night, testing new ideas, new angles, new impossibilities. By the time they finished filming all the snake-style sequences, Tang Chia had lost 15 pounds from stress. But he had also created some of the most visually distinctive fight choreography in martial arts cinema. Movements that looked alien, beautiful, and absolutely lethal. Number 9.
愿与朝廷有10从10不从之约。
Liu Feng and Philip Kwok stopped speaking to each other during production, and it made their on-screen rivalry better. Nobody knows exactly what sparked it. Some say it was a disagreement about choreography. Others claim it was personal, something said off camera that crossed a line. Whatever happened, halfway through filming, the two leads went cold. They'd interact during scenes, professional, focused, but between takes they'd retreat to opposite sides of the set. No eye contact, no conversation, nothing. Chang Che noticed immediately, and instead of intervening, instead of forcing them to reconcile, he used it. He started scheduling their scenes together back to back, maximizing the tension, letting their real animosity bleed into their performances. The final confrontation between their characters was filmed over 4 grueling days. Every strike had a little more force than necessary. Every block was a fraction late, pushing the edge of safety. The stunt coordinators had to step in multiple times to prevent actual injuries, but the footage was electric. You can feel the hatred crackling between them, real and raw and dangerous. When they wrapped to their last scene together, Liu Feng walked off set without a word. Philip stayed behind, icing his ribs. They didn't speak again until the premiere months later. And even then, it was brief, cordial, professional. To this day, neither has publicly discussed what happened between them during Invincible Shaolin. But whatever it was, it created one of the most intense rivalries ever captured on film. Sometimes the best performances come not from acting, but from something real that actors can't quite control. Number 10. The film's most iconic line wasn't in the script. During a tense confrontation scene, one character was supposed to deliver a formal challenge, something traditional about honor in combat. The actor, Chang Sheng, rehearsed the line all morning, but when cameras rolled, he blanked, completely forgot the dialogue. In that moment of panic, he improvised, saying something completely different, raw and personal and unexpected. Chang Che didn't yell cut. He let the scene play out. The other actors responded naturally, adjusting their performances, the whole sequence evolving in real time around this unscripted moment. When they finally cut, Chang Che approached Chang Sheng expecting to reshoot. Instead, he smiled. "That was better than what I wrote," he said. "Keep it." The line stayed in the film, and it became the most quoted moment of the entire movie. Audiences latched onto it immediately. It showed up in reviews, in fan discussions, eventually in other films as an homage. Chang Sheng's moment of panic had accidentally created something iconic. Years later, in interviews, he'd laugh about it, admitting he thought he'd ruined the take, thought he'd have to do it again, thought Chang Che would be furious. Instead, that improvised line became his legacy. It proved something fundamental about filmmaking, that sometimes the magic happens not when everything goes according to plan, but when someone forgets the plan entirely and just reacts. Invincible Shaolin was full of meticulous choreography, precise technique, carefully crafted sequences, but its most memorable moment came from pure accident. Number 11. The final fight wasn't choreographed. It was chaos. By the time they reached the climactic battle, the production was 3 weeks over schedule and hemorrhaging money. The studio sent word, "Finish it tomorrow or we shut you down." Chang Che gathered his actors and told them the truth. "We have 1 day, no rehearsal, no safety meeting. We're going to film this fight start to finish, and whatever happens, happens." The stunt team looked at him like he'd lost his mind, but they showed up the next morning ready. The fight involved 12 actors, 24 weapons, fire, breakaway furniture, and a collapsing set piece. They rolled cameras at dawn. For 8 straight hours, they fought. Some takes worked, some didn't. Actors got hit for real. Props broke unexpectedly. Someone's costume caught fire and had to be extinguished mid-take. But they kept going. No breaks, no stopping. When the sun started setting, Chang Che called it. They'd shot everything they needed and more. The editor later said he had never seen such raw, unpolished footage. But it cut together beautifully because the desperation was real. Number 12. 3 actors walked off set, and they had good reason. Midway through production, word spread that Shaw Brothers was cutting corners on safety. Equipment wasn't being properly maintained. Crash mats were thin and worn. Medical staff was minimal. 3 supporting actors confronted Chang Che, demanding better conditions. He told them the studio wouldn't approve additional safety budget. They had a choice: continue under current conditions or leave. All 3 walked. No dramatic exit, no public statements. They just didn't show up the next day. Chang Che had to scramble, rewriting scenes, redistributing dialogue, finding replacement actors who could match the physicality required. Some characters were simply written out, their storylines abandoned mid-film. If you watch carefully, there are plot threads that start but never resolve. Those are the ghosts of the actors who left. The incident sparked quiet conversations throughout the Hong Kong film industry about working conditions, about what directors could demand, about where the line was between dedication and exploitation. Number 13. The crane style required a specialist they couldn't afford, so they faked it. True crane style kung fu involves incredible balance, one-legged stances held for extended periods, strikes delivered while maintaining impossible poses. It's beautiful, elegant, and extremely difficult. Chang Che wanted it in the film, but didn't have budget for a crane-style master, so they improvised. The choreography team studied photographs, watched old films, broke down the basic principles. Then they taught the actors simplified versions, movements that looked like crane style, but were actually much easier to perform. They used camera angles to hide imperfections, quick cuts to mask balance issues, wire work to extend poses beyond what was naturally possible. It worked. Audiences never knew. Critics praised the authentic crane-style sequences, but the actors knew, and they felt guilty about it, like they were lying to audiences who trusted Shaw Brothers to deliver real martial arts. Years later, one actor admitted the truth in an interview. The backlash was immediate. Fans felt betrayed, but he stood by it. We did our best with what we had. Number 14. The monastery set caught fire, and cameras kept rolling. During a scene involving torches and oil lamps, something ignited that wasn't supposed to. A wall panel, old wood soaked in lacquer, went up fast. Flames spread across the set before anyone could react. Actors scattered. Crew grabbed extinguishers. And Chang Che yelled, "Keep filming!" One cameraman actually did. He captured 30 seconds of genuine chaos before fire marshals shut down production. That footage made it into the final cut. The monastery burning, actors fleeing, real fear on their faces. It's one of the most visceral moments in the film because it's not special effects. It's an actual disaster playing out in real time. The fire caused $50,000 in damage. The studio considered shutting down the entire production, but test footage of the fire scene looked so good that executives decided to rebuild the set and continue. Sometimes accidents create magic, but this time the magic came with a price tag that nearly killed the film. Number 15. By the time Invincible Shaolin wrapped, half the cast was injured. Sprained ankles, broken fingers, pulled muscles, concussions. The final week of shooting looked like a battlefield hospital. Actors limped between takes. Ice packs and bandages were everywhere. One actor had his hand in a cast, but filmed anyway, hiding it with careful camera angles. Another fought through cracked ribs, breathing shallow, moving stiff. Philip Kwok's knee still hadn't healed from his balcony jump. Lu Feng's ankle was purple and swollen, but they finished. Every single person who started the film made it to the end, injuries and all. Chang Che later called it his toughest production, not because of the action, but because of watching his actors suffer and knowing he was the one pushing them. Some never worked with him again. Others came back for more because they understood something. Pain fades, but films last forever. And Invincible Shaolin was worth every bruise, every break, every moment of agony. Pretty wild so far, right? If you're hooked on this madness, go ahead and subscribe, because we're about to hit studio battles, a band scene, and the moment one actor realized he'd pushed too far. You won't want to miss what's next. Number 16. Shaw Brothers executives hated the ending and demanded reshoots. Chang Che's original finale was dark, ambiguous, no clear victory. The Shaolin students defeated their enemies, but at massive cost. Bodies everywhere. Pyrrhic victory at best. The studio said audiences wouldn't accept it. They wanted triumph, heroism, a clean resolution. Chang Che refused. They went back and forth for weeks, screaming matches in boardrooms, threats of cutting funding for his next project. Finally, a compromise. Chang Che could keep his dark ending, but he had to add an epilogue showing the surviving students rebuilding. He shot it in one day, minimal dialogue, mostly montage. It's tacked on, obvious, tonally inconsistent with everything that came before. And fans noticed. Critics called it a studio-mandated happy ending that undermined the film's power, but it was enough to get Invincible Shaolin into theaters. Chang Che later said he regretted the compromise, that he should have fought harder, that the original ending was perfect. The unaltered version exists somewhere in Shaw Brothers' archives, but it's never been released publicly. Number 17. One scene was banned in 3 countries, and it had nothing to do with violence. There's a sequence where a corrupt official betrays the Shaolin Temple for money. The scene included dialogue criticizing government authority, questioning institutional power. In the original script, it was stronger, explicitly political. Chang Che toned it down during filming, but even the softened version was too much for some censors. Taiwan banned the scene for anti-government sentiment. Singapore cut it entirely. Mainland China wouldn't allow the film to screen at all. Shaw Brothers had to create multiple cuts for different markets, removing or altering the scene depending on where the film would play. Hong Kong audiences saw the full version. Everyone else got a sanitized edit. It was frustrating for Chang Che, but not surprising. He dealt with censorship his entire career, always walking the line between artistic expression and commercial viability. The banned scene is available now on some international releases, a small piece of dialogue that somehow threatened governments across Asia. Number 18. The score was composed in 3 days by a man who'd never seen the film. Shaw Brothers had a stable of composers who churned out music fast, matching it to rough cuts, working from scene descriptions. For Invincible Shaolin, they hired Chen Young-yu, a veteran who had scored dozens of martial arts films. But this time, the schedule was impossible. Chang Che delivered his final cut days before the premiere. Chen had 72 hours to compose and record an entire orchestral score. He worked around the clock, writing themes for each martial arts style, battle motifs, emotional cues. The orchestra recorded everything in 2 marathon sessions. There was no time to adjust, no opportunity to fine-tune. What they recorded was what went into the film. And somehow, it worked. The score perfectly complemented the action, heightened the emotion, enhanced the pacing. Chen later said he had no idea how he pulled it off, that it was pure instinct and desperation. But the music became iconic, sampled in later films, referenced by composers who studied his work. 3 Days of Madness created a soundtrack that still sounds fresh decades later. Number 19. The film failed in its initial release and became a cult classic 20 years later. When Invincible Shaolin premiered in 1978, it barely broke even. Audiences wanted something lighter, less brutal. Critics called it excessive, exhausting, too dark for the genre. Shaw Brothers considered it a disappointment and moved on. Chang Che made other films. The cast scattered to different projects, and Invincible Shaolin faded into obscurity, one more forgotten kung fu movie in a decade that produced hundreds. But in the late 1990s, something changed. Western audiences discovered it through bootleg VHS tapes, then DVD imports. Film students started analyzing its choreography, its cinematography, its unflinching approach to violence. Tarantino mentioned it in interviews. The Wu-Tang Clan sampled its dialogue. Suddenly, Invincible Shaolin was cool. It got restored, remastered, released in pristine condition. New audiences discovered what 1978 audiences had missed. A brutal, brilliant, uncompromising masterpiece. The actors who had suffered through production finally got recognition. Chang Che's vision was vindicated. Sometimes the best films aren't appreciated in their moment. They have to wait for audiences ready to understand them. Number 20. Chang Che never made another film like it, and he did that on purpose. After Invincible Shaolin, he consciously shifted away from the brutal realism that had defined the production. His next films used more wire work, more fantastical elements, less physical punishment for his actors. When asked why, he was honest. "I pushed too hard. I hurt people I cared about. It wasn't worth it." He'd achieved something remarkable, a kung fu film that felt dangerous, real, earned, but the cost haunted him. He stayed friends with most of the cast, but some relationships never fully recovered. Liu Yufeng's ankle never healed properly. Philip Kwok walked with a slight limp for years, and Chang Che carried that guilt. He kept making films, great films, but he never again demanded that level of sacrifice. Invincible Shaolin became a monument to what could be achieved through sheer will and suffering. but it also became a warning about how far was too far. In interviews later in life, Chang Che would say it was both his proudest achievement and his biggest regret. Not the film itself, but what it cost everyone who made it. Bonus fact: there's a blooper reel that Shaw Brothers refuses to release, and the rumor is it's more entertaining than the actual film. During production, someone had the idea to document the chaos behind the scenes. Failed takes, actors cracking up, stunts going wrong, arguments between crew members, the genuine madness of making Invincible Shaolin. Hours of footage exists somewhere in the Shaw Brothers archives. Actors have confirmed it. Chang Che mentioned it once before, immediately refusing to discuss it further. The studio's official position is that it was lost or destroyed, but people who've worked in the archives say it still exists, locked away, because it reveals too much. Not just funny moments, but the real injuries, the real conflicts, the real cost of martial arts cinema in the 1970s. One former Shaw Brothers executive said, "If people saw what actually happened on that set, they'd never watch kung fu movies the same way again." Maybe that's why it stays hidden, because sometimes the magic needs mystery, and sometimes the truth is too brutal even for a film called Invincible Shaolin.